everybody, it's Chris Widener. I'm the founder of the Royal Table, a great new ministry for men. We'll tell you a little bit more about that later on. But the first thing I want to do is introduce to you our guest. I'm going to let him tell you most about himself, but he's from North Bend, Oregon, which is kind of interesting because I went to high school in North Bend, Washington, which is where the TV show Twin Peaks was filmed. So I'm guessing that North Bend, Washington's a little weirder than North Bend, Oregon, but we'll find out. His name is Dale Cooper, and he's been in ministry for a long time and just a great guy, new friend of mine. But I want to introduce him to you and then hear his story because, when we hear other people's stories, there's sometimes we just connect right away. Oh, that's my story, right? And then other times it's not my story, but it shows us God's glory in a different story. And so, the classic would be the person who lived a crazy life and then they got radically saved versus the kid who grew up in Sunday school, never walked away from the Lord, but we learn things from each other. So, Dale Cooper from North Bend, Oregon, welcome to the Royal Table.
Hey, it's great to be here.
Awesome. So tell me, kind of give me the basic overview. Let's leave out your conversion or your faith at this point, but give us the overview. Where'd you grow up? What do you do? Give us your kind of your life story in 2 minutes or so.
Okay, well, I was born and raised and lived most of my adult life in Utah. I was actually lived in Salt Lake City, went to high school there. We were never part of the LDS faith, so we were kind of always outcasts. And I grew up with a single mother in the 60s and 70s, and that didn't help.
Right.
Yeah. Got into some trouble when I was a teenager, and that wound me up in the military. So I joined Utah Air National Guard, and I spent 27 years in the Air National Guard. I worked full
Thank you for
time
your
for them.
service.
Thank you. I had fun, and it was a great mission.
What were you
And
doing in the National Guard?
I was an aircraft mechanic, aircraft electrician.
Mm.
So after that, when I retired from the Air Guard, I took a civilian position at Hill Air Force Base at the depot there and spent the last 10 years working on Navy C-130 refuelers. I worked on Air Force refuelers before that. So anyway, I
So
did that.
what's that? If I do my math right, that's 37 years in the military.
It was, yeah, 37 with the
37.
Air
All right.
Force.
I'm guessing you got a nice little pension.
Yeah. So
Good.
retired in 2020 and retired and the next day moved to North Bend, Oregon, because I just felt the Lord tugging my heart and moving me here. And since
Had
then,
you ever been there before?
nope, just
How
once.
did you hear of North Bend, Oregon?
So I had some friends that lived here, and as a joke, they sent me a real estate listing because I'd always talked about retiring to the coast, but never planned on it, just kind of talked about it. They sent me a real estate listing, fell in love with the house, but just wasn't where God wanted me to be. So he used that house to get me to put mine up for sale, and then he found me the house he wanted me to be at and played into a whole little other backstory that I have since I've been here.
It's sort of similar to us moving to Chattanooga. We had never been to Chattanooga, and I've given 2,500 speeches all over the world, mostly in the U.S. I'd never been to Chattanooga, but we felt like the Lord was telling us to move here. And I still don't know why. We've been here 4.5 years, but I still haven't figured out why exactly. But yeah, sometimes the Lord just picks you up and drops you in a new place.
Yeah, I knew two people when I moved here, and it was in the middle of COVID. So finding a church was difficult. Found the church that I attend because they were meeting outside,
Mm.
and just kind of, it's hard for a single guy sometimes to fit in at a church. So I just started showing up and got in with the Bible study and just kind of fit in. And after a while, they asked me if I'd be their custodian. And then one day, I was taking some classes at Liberty University, felt the lead of the Lord to do that. And then the next thing I know, I am the interim associate pastor for pastoral care at my church.
Wow.
So,
And then, of course, I also kind of know, because I know your story a little bit, is you went into that church as a single guy and now you're a married guy. Tell us about
yeah.
that.
Well, so the house I didn't buy led to the one that I did. And 2 months later, this family moved in across the street from me. And as I started going to church, there's this lady that had been going to our church, and she lost her husband during COVID.
Hmm.
And so she would come in and ask me to save a seat for her because she's kind of on the short side and she can't see over people, but she's also the greeter. So she always walks into the service a little bit late. So I started just saving her a seat. We didn't chat much other than, hi, how are you? And then one day I walk out my door and I thought I saw her parked across the street from my house. Well, it turns out that couple that moved in is her daughter. And I was up clipping the hedge one day, and she came out and started talking to me, and she needed a friend to go to a movie with her. So I went to the movies with her, and we kind of hit it off. A couple of weeks later, we had lunch and spent 2 hours talking to each other. Like, didn't even realize that. But she asked me to go to a conference with her, a Life Surge conference, which is about bringing business to the kingdom to the marketplace.
Yeah.
So we went to that, and we just kind of felt like God was kind of telling us, "Hey, maybe you two ought to be a thing." And
Mm.
so now we're married. We just have an incredibly crazy life, and it's fun.
And here's the full circle of this. I knew your wife before you did.
Yes, you
Even
did.
I don't think I've ever met her in person. Maybe at an event or something I've met her,
Right.
but she participated in a online leadership thing that I did. Boy, it had to have been 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And so when she saw the Royal Table online on Facebook, because we're Facebook friends, she told you, you joined, and now we're friends.
Yeah.
That's the full. Isn't it funny how God orchestrates our lives and just brings random people out of and then you realize wasn't random at all.
Right. So
Yeah.
it's just I love to see him at work. And but anyway, yeah, it's just that's kind of how God just leads my life. And I just keep saying yes, and he keeps doing incredible things.
It's
So
funny
I
what
keep
saying
showing
yes
up.
to God can do.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So let's circle back then, and now we've laid that life track down. Now let's lay your faith life down. Tell us your faith journey.
Well, like I said, grew up in Utah, wasn't part of the predominant faith, but my grandmother joined the Methodist Church and was a lifelong member of the Methodist Church.
Can I
So
ask a real quick question?
yeah.
Because I've been to Utah, but I fly in, I give speeches and leave. I've never, stayed there, or spent any time there really. Were there or are there lots of other non-LDS churches, but particularly
So
when you were growing up?
when I was growing up, no, there were just a few.
Mm.
The big denominations were present, but not in a big way. There's a small Catholic group. There was a Presbyterian church in Salt Lake that was pretty big. But as times changed and the city has grown, that number's changed a lot. There are actually now quite a few.
Well, I think a lot of churches see it as a mission field.
Yeah. So, but when I was growing up, not so much. But anyway, some things happened at the church with the youth group, and it kind of turned me off from being a Christian. So I kind of just walked away from the whole thing,
Mm.
left a bad taste in my mouth. My mom got saved when I was a teenager, but it just kind of, like I said, got in some trouble, wound up in the military, wound up with the wrong kind of friends, and followed their example, and just wasn't living a good moral life, and that led to a couple of three failed marriages,
Mm.
and I finally just got to a place where I didn't know what to do. God in 2010 decided that He would take the things from me that were keeping me from Him. So in 6 weeks, I lost a job that I loved, I lost a business that I loved, and I lost a wife that I loved.
Mm.
And but I deserved those things. I can't say that I didn't. I was a prideful man. I was arrogant. I was just living for me. And I came home one night in April, and I'd been at the bar with some friends, and I walked in my house, and there was a little plaque that my ex had left on an entry table we had, and it said, "When life gets to be more than you can stand, kneel." And I did.
Mm.
And then
Mm.
I noticed that a church I'd driven by, I knew the pastor because he'd married my ex, and um, they had a sign out front that said they were having an Easter sunrise service. So I showed up, and I guess I kind of looked like somebody shot my dog. So pastor says, "Why don't you come see me on Tuesday?" So I did. And when I did, and I told him the things that were going on in my life, I thought I'd find a sympathetic ear, and I didn't. He unloaded on me, and it really kind of surprised me because I was like, okay, well, now what do I do? And then at the end of that, after all those things I shared with him, when I walked out and was headed to the car, he stopped me and he says, "Hey, come here." And he gave me a hug, and he told
Mm.
me everything was going to be okay. And
Now, when
that's
you
what
say he unloaded on you, what do you mean?
he just told me the truth.
Mm. It's funny because when I got saved, I was 17 years old, and we had this youth pastor, and he was a good old boy from Montana. And I always tell people, he had two things that I needed at that point. And my dad had died when I was 4, and I'd never
Mhm.
had a male role model. So, never really anybody to lead me or whatever, or to correct me or rebuke me or
Right.
whatever. So I always say I needed two things I was looking for, and he had them both. Number one, size 11 cowboy boots. Sometimes we need somebody in our life. That's part of what we're doing at the Royal Table is
Right.
you need brothers who will just look and go, "You're wrong."
Yeah. And
That's no good. That's going to lead you in a bad place.
yeah. And I love that he had the courage to do that. But when he gave me that hug, I thought, that's what being a Christian is. And that's what
That's
I,
speaking the truth in love.
yeah,
You
it
know, we
really
tend to
was.
fall either speaking the truth or love, but you
Right.
need to combine those two because the people who, oh, I just love them, they don't tell them they're doing anything wrong. Or the speaking in the truth, we condemn them and we judge them with no love. Speaking the truth in love is what makes that connection between people and is drawing. It's magnetic to God because of that.
Yeah. So anyway, so I started going to his church, and a couple of weeks later, I accepted Christ. But Carl saw something in me, and he said he just felt like he needed to disciple me. So I started meeting with him on Tuesdays, and so we would go through books. We would do that, and as I grew, he let me speak one Sunday for our men's Sunday during the year. He let me bring the message, but he grew comfortable with me when he would be out of town. He'd ask me to fill in for him.
Wow.
But then as I grew as a believer, then he started taking me places with him. Got tied up with a group that did men's conferences because Carl got invited to a meeting and I had no business being there. And I showed up and they needed a website, so I built one for them, and wound up doing that with those guys for a few years. And through that, God's just keep opening doors, and I just keep saying yes. He opened a door for us to lead a Bible study at the Ogden Rescue Mission. And I remember the first Sunday or first Wednesday we were there, I was scared to death, but got over that and have been serving at rescue missions there and here. And just because God keeps opening doors for me to do that, and I love
That's
it.
awesome. So tell me, what's God doing in your life now? What's your big, what's the thing you're learning right now? Where's God
Uh,
have you?
that thing you posted this morning that you shared with us about sexual purity.
Mm,
So I lead a Sunday school class, and we have been in 1 Corinthians 5 and 6 for the last couple of weeks. And then I do a small group of discipling three other guys so that they will go out and make disciples. That's where we have two lessons left and some material we're using from the Navigators, and that's the lesson this week is just about
oh,
purity.
wow. Yeah.
So just kind of a timely message there, but I get to love on the people at my church, and God's using me for good things there. I'm excited about being part of this because I know firsthand how important it is to disciple men because I was discipled and I want to pay that forward. And last Thursday when our group meets, I told the guys the idea was they would go in turn and start their own groups and
Mm,
disciple other men, and
yeah.
two of them are going to do that. So that's a big thing. But so God's just doing that, and then He's led Cheryl and I to a business opportunity to take the kingdom to the marketplace.
Mm,
So when I'm not busy with the church, I'm busy with the business.
yeah. Let's talk about that sexual purity a little bit because it
Yeah,
is something that men really struggle with, even strong Christian men,
yeah,
because it's a temptation. And by the way, we're reading the book right now, our first book that we're reading in the Royal Table. And by the way, if you're interested in the Royal Table, you can go to royaltable.org. We shut it down for 3 months at a time. So we'll be open back up October 1st. You can put your name on a waiting list. But we're reading a book that used to be called Money, Sex, and Power. And then some idiot marketing guy decided to change it to The Challenge of the Disciplined Life, which I think is having written 27 books, you work so hard for a great title. And they took it but Money, Sex, and Power is they're the big three for men. And frankly,
yeah,
they're the big three in marriage.
yeah,
Um, I think most men, I'd love to get your feedback. Most men view sexual immorality. I mean, there's the obvious cheating, premarital sex, actual sexual activity. And then they lump porn in with it, which they should. But then above and beyond that, it's kind of like, well, as long as I'm not, having sex with somebody or I'm not watching people have sex together, then I'm good. And I don't think that's true. There's a psalm, and I can't remember what psalm it is, but it says, I will put no vile thing before my eyes.
yeah.
And we say, oh, well, that's porn. But I think it's more than that.
Yeah, it is, and I can tell you from living an immoral life that the damage that it does, right? And I talk about that a lot, even in my own faith, because about the time I walked away from the faith, that was the whole Jim and Tammy Faye Baker
Mm,
scandal from the '80s. Remember that, and the damage
yeah.
that did to the church, and it damaged a bunch of people my age. oh, don't want anything to do with Christianity, just a bunch of phonies.
Yes.
You know? And so it not only does it hurt God's heart, it hurts the church, it hurts our witness, it hurts our families, it hurts the families of other people, destroys our own reputations, and it just and it goes on, and we see so many of the leaders that get in big prominent positions that give into it.
Yeah.
And it's just it hurts my heart.
Well, and that has a big damage because it, you have, a pastor of, well, like Bill Hybels, Bill
Yeah,
Hybels, 30 something years, and it was happening all the time,
yeah,
according to the reports. And then it really rocked. I mean, not only his church, which was like 40,000 people, but
yeah,
then the Willow Creek Association, which was thousands of churches around the globe. But
yeah,
it also hurts the little guy who nobody knows who they are.
right,
And one of the things about sexual temptation is the devil doesn't show up in a red suit with horns and a pitchfork and say, bang
right.
your head against the wall. He always chooses something that is going to feel good, make us feel good, y-
Hmm.
you know, um, and he takes what God created and he distorts it. God's a creator. The devil is a distorter. He
Right.
takes things that are good and he distorts them to make them bad. And, I read a book a long time ago called Every Man's Battle, probably in the 90s. And it kind of gives you these little rules. And one of them gets to the very lowest temptation, right? The lowest sexual temptation. And that is a really beautiful woman walks into the room or is at the park where you're at, or, whatever. You don't know who it is, whatever, but your eyes go right there.
Right.
Now, there's nothing wrong with noticing people, right? If you're in a restaurant and a good-looking guy walks in, you're like, "Oh, wow, that guy's a good-looking guy," or "Wow, she's a pretty, very beautiful woman," right? Beauty is beauty.
Right.
But it's when we linger.
Right.
The lingering, if the devil's almost like he says, "Okay, I'm going to walk this beautiful person in there, and then if I can just get him to linger."
Hmm.
Because the lingering creates the fantasy. And so
Right.
one of the things that I thought was really great in that book, Every Man's Battle, is he called it the eye bounce, I think is what he called it, or bounce your eyes. So, you're out, whatever, and you look and you see it, you bounce your eyes away. It's like a
Right.
bounce. And I have used that so much for 30 years. It's something at my forefront. Bounce your eyes, because if you don't bounce your eyes, you're going to linger.
Right.
And it's the lingering that gets you into the trouble. It's not the noticing, because everybody
Right.
notices. All the women notice that a beautiful woman just walked in,
Yeah.
right? But it's the lingering.
Right.
And
It's
so, rarely will you be, just confronted with, bam, I'm a woman and I want you to cheat on your wife with me. Like it's that temptation that grows and grows.
Yeah, and it is, and it's tough. And like you said, we have to really watch it. And I think what you go to, and James talks about this, right? He says that you get enticed, and then you
Yes.
give into the enticement, and then sin progresses from that, and it
Yeah.
leads to death,
Yeah.
right?
100%.
So we gotta be, just stand against that. Like you said, bounce your eyes, do whatever. I try to look up, look away. I think
Yeah.
about what Job said about not looking at the young women,
Yeah.
and it's hard. One of the rules that I have as the pastor is I won't meet with a woman on my own.
Oh, when I took my first job, I was a youth minister in New Jersey. And when I did my interview, they were about 2 months away from finishing the brand new building. They were meeting in a school at the time. And the pastor took me down the hallway where all the offices were, and he showed me my office, which was right next to his office. And I said, great office. I was going to take the job. And I said, if I take this job, there's only one change I want made to this office. And he said, what's that? And I said, I want a big window in this door. And he said, why? And I said, I'm not putting myself behind a door with no window with a teenage girl or
Yeah,
or her mother or whatever. So here's the funny thing. When I came back 6 weeks later and we moved in 2 or 3 weeks later, every door in the entire church had a window on it,
very cool.
because he went, oh yeah, that makes sense. It's kind of that Billy Graham model, right?
Yeah,
If Billy pressed the up button and a woman was on it by herself, he did not get in the elevator. He said, I'll take the next one.
yeah. And we have to, and some people think that's extreme, but if that's what you got to do, that's what you got to do.
Well, and in this day and age we live in, it's not just to protect yourself from pursuing,
Right.
it's to protect yourself from false allegations.
That's true. You know,
Yeah. You
and
know,
he
I
was,
don't think Billy was looking was looking for
no,
women on elevators, you
but you
know.
know, where he was and the prominence he had, that was smart, right? You just don't put yourself. So we had an instance with the group of guys I did do an men's conference, and a few years before they had been doing it for a while before I got involved with them, and they sent one of the wives to pick up one of the guys at the airport,
Mm,
and he had a fit. He said,
yeah.
"Don't you ever do that to me again."
I'll tell you something funny. I heard this story. It was about these two missionaries. They'd served like 50 years on the mission field, a guy and a gal. They weren't married, but they both ended up at it might have been Liberty or something like that. They were taking classes in retirement because they'd always wanted to take classes. They didn't know each other when they showed up, and they got to know each other. They were just friends. And
Mhm.
the woman, it was like a night class or something. And the woman said, "Can you give me a ride home?" He said, "Oh, I don't, I don't want to be in a car alone with you." And she said, "Is it me you don't trust, or is it you don't trust?" And they were like 80 or something
Right.
like that. But still, that was that guy's mentality. So
Yeah.
as we wrap up, what advice would you give to a modern man? Let's talk to the Christians, but they're not necessarily deep Christians. They're Christian men. They've made a profession. They go to church. They're involved. If somebody says, "Hey, what are you?" They'd say, "Oh, I'm a Christian," but not necessarily a deep Christian. What would
Right.
you tell them?
That you need guys in your life, that
Hmm.
you need to fellowship with the men, and you need to be discipled by somebody. And so you have that man to go to when you face these things, when you face trouble at home, when you have a problem with your wife or your kids that you can't deal with, or when you feel yourself slipping, that you can make a phone call. The biggest problem I've seen in our church in the last 3 or 4 weeks is guys that are stumbling because they're alone. They're not plugged into the church
100%.
and they have free time, and their free time gets them in trouble.
Yeah.
And I've counseled each one of them. The next time, call me first.
Yeah.
They need that. Guys need that in their lives.
And you said if they're having a problem with their wife, now it's not to go, "Oh, my wife's horrible," and then the other guys go, "Yeah, I agree, she's horrible." No, this is for, okay, I'm in a spot here. I
Yeah,
need your help. How do
exactly.
I serve my wife? How do I lead my wife? How do I get my family out of this? So
Right.
that we stay intact and everybody, comes out good on the other end.
Yeah, exactly. And we all have little things in our life, but I think having that man that you can go to, even an older guy. That's why I said a group of guys or a guy. I have guys in my church who've been married 50 years. If I need marital advice, I'm going to them.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember I had a friend in Phoenix when we lived in Phoenix. I had moved down there and I met Denise, and I don't even think we were married yet, but I went to a friend of mine and I said, there's just something that it's kind of bugging me and blah, blah, blah. I don't even really remember what it was, but he looked me square in the face and he wasn't even a Christian. And he said, "Buddy, you're wrong on this one." I said, He said, "You are wrong on this one. She's right. You're wrong."
Yeah,
And I needed that. And
right.
he was a very strong bulldog type of a guy, right? And he was
Mhm.
compassionate when he said it, but he was direct. Now, how much more if that can come from somebody who's, rooted in the Lord?
Absolutely. And that, like I said, that's my biggest advice. And that's kind of why I'm excited to be part of this and see what God's going to do with it. Because men need each other. We live in a society where men are being devalued and demasculated, and fatherlessness is running rampant. And we're raising generations of kids that don't have fathers.
Yeah,
And we got to start discipling our men so that they can disciple other men,
that's,
right? And let our God be a God of multiplication.
yeah, 100%. Well, Dale, thanks for joining us. I'm glad you're part of the Royal Table. And folks, if you want to join us, you can go to royaltable.org and you can kind of see it up there in the little logos there. And we have a wait list now, but it opens up October 1st and you can join us. We do 2 meetings a month, Tuesday nights, first and third Tuesday nights, or first and third Wednesdays at 11:30 Eastern. So we give people options, and you can go to either or all of them if you want to. But if a nighttime works better than a daytime, or a daytime works better than a nighttime, we read 4 books together every year. We have an app where we're getting really active on our app, where people are posting things and insights they're getting from the books, and prayer requests and all those kinds of things. And the app is super easy to use. So jump on over there and join us. And we would love to have you participate in the as we grow the Royal Table. It's not sessions where everybody leaves and a new session comes in. We're allowing people to come in at a slower pace. So that we can create that culture and we bring in new people and they see that culture because we really feel like culture is very important. What a culture is really just the group's expectations and standards, right? And that's really what we want to do. So we would love to see you over there. Dale, thanks for joining us on the Royal Table
All right, man.
today.
Thanks for having me. Have a blessed week in the Lord, brother.
Yep. Take care, my friend. See ya.
All right.
Bye bye.
Bye now.